Right now on Tech Radio, we introduce you to the slimmest smartphone ever.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. This is episode 1069, looking at the 7 biggest stories of the week, including Samsung's S25 Edge, which has just been released, Microsoft's plan to cut thousands of jobs, and a powerful voice. Plus, we discover how the music industry can work with generative AI with an expert in the area, Dr. Martin Clancy from Insight at DCU and Trinity College Dublin. Let's get to it.
From TechCentral.ie, this is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Joining me as always, our editor-in-chief, the man who knows everything.
You are a very happy camper today.
Very happy camper today.
And it goes to our first story.
I'm a happy camper today. I may not be a happy camper on the 1st of June after I've dropped 1,100 quid.
And this is a definite purchase for you.
No, but it's a big consideration today. It's like, okay, I need a new phone. I was literally going, I have to have this because it's new. It's the slimmest smartphone in the world. I don't care. I need to have it. And then I thought, by the end of the summer, I won't care. It'll just be the phone. So maybe I should actually go and get something that's maybe not quite just released and whatever. I'll see.
Okay, so this is exactly what are you talking about?
I am talking about the Samsung Galaxy S25 Edge. It's out in the world. It's been released. We have hands on the whole thing. It will be available from the end of the month, start of June. Interestingly, Vodafone haven't got anything about it on their website. 3.ie do. Okay. The Samsung Galaxy S25 Edge was touted at the last big Samsung reveal, but they didn't quite reveal it. It was like kind of off in a railed off area where nobody could touch anything, and it was just kind of like these little tiny little thin phones hanging off hooks, and that's all we knew. Now it's out in the world. We have the facts that the Galaxy S25 Edge is officially the slimmest smartphone ever. It is a shade under 6 millimeters thick. Okay. Now, that's 1.5 millimeters thinner than the S25 Plus. And I'm wondering, will I notice? That's why I can't wait to get my hands on
when you go into the shop and you've got one in one hand and one in the other.
And then the other thing that's really interesting is because the camera lenses, you can't make them any thinner. So you've got this really, really thin phone, and then at the end there's a really big bump for the lenses. So from what I've heard from people who've handled it is they said the balance is right. Okay, so it doesn't just kind of fall over. It's not top heavy or anything like that. But you do notice that big bump there. So how do you what do you do with that? And I immediately thinking is, well, I'll have to get a case to protect this phone.
One that you'll be able to find at a reasonable price.
Well, true, but it's eliminating the entire fact that it is the slimmest smartphone ever. Yeah. I had a pal of mine in RT when smartphones came, or not smartphones, but our phones came out first, and they were big bricks. You remember that from whatever. They were brick, and the whole thing at the time was they were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And Tony used to kind of go, oh, what's that under that paper clip? Oh, it's my new phone. That's the way he did it. I would like to do the same thing with like kind of where is it? Where is it? Oh my God, there's my new phone. It's so slim. Anyways, so yes, it's out 5.8 millimeters thick, which is not bad. Screen size is 6.7 inches, which is good. That's a good, nice. Good. Yeah. I think it's the perfect size for me. It's light as well as you would expect. The S25 Plus, which is what I'm kind of comparing it to, is 190 grams exactly. This slim phone, 163. Okay. Ooh, okay. Now, to put that into something we can understand, we all go down to Super Value or whatever, and we get our 3-pack of Mars bars or a 4-pack of Mars bars, okay? The 3-pack of Mars bars is the slim phone, and the 4-pack of Mars bars is the regular S25 Plus.
Right.
That's the difference in weight. The camera, they've bumped up as well as the lenses being exceptional. It's got the same sensor as the S25 Ultra. Now, that's a 200 megapixel camera, which is ridiculous when you're taking pictures of your dog or whatever. It has all the AI tricks and all that kind of stuff, but as I say, sticks out a lot. When I get into my lava, then we'll know. Battery as well is slightly smaller. I think it's 3,900 milliamp per hour is the thing. Versus 4,000, which will be more regular. But Samsung still say that it will deliver 24 hours. So, 1,089 is the exact price of that. I'm considering it. The thing is thinness an issue with smartphones, do you think?
Well, okay. On one hand, this is their main selling point. This is their, nobody else has this.
True. Yeah.
Line, which is okay. But how much of a selling point is that? Like, I've got a Pixel 9, etc., etc. It's a bit chunky. Fine. It's a little bit chunky, but it's a good workhorse phone, and it does everything pretty well.
Yeah.
Do I want another phone because it's thinner? I don't have use of a thinner form factor. Now, I would say if you were to put it in my hand, I'd probably go, "Oh, that's actually fantastic. Yep, that'd be great. That'd be quite nice for carrying around.
Yeah,
it's not going to be as bulgy in my pocket. Yep, there's a lot of goodness there. Do I see a need for it in my life today? No. Does it solve an additional problem today? No. But as an object of desire, maybe?
Definitely an object of desire. Definitely an object of desire. But do you know what else has been the object of desire is the flip phones. So when you flip it open, you get the large screen. And then also the fold phones have all been objects of desire. I don't see them that much.
No.
I've seen them. Not that much.
Yeah.
So I wonder if kind of this would be the same. And that's why I'm kind of thinking, yes, I as a punter would, have the edge and this, that and the other. But actually, do you know what? Maybe I'll just be better off with an S25 Ultra because it'll be hunkier and chunkier and it'll do more powerful.
I would have thought I'd see the flip an awful lot more than I do. The fold, okay, business device, I get it. I understand why I mightn't see as many of these. But the flip, I just don't see the kids out with them. I just don't.
All right. Well, we'll see. Anyway, that's the S25 Edge out in the world. Getting a good reaction. We'll see how it does on the sales as we go on through the summer. Now, very serious story today with the good weather. Very serious story today with the good weather, the incredible weather we're having. And I hope it's not going to be one of these, wow, amazing. The entire summer is going to be brilliant. And then it turns out not to be. I hope not. But anyway, God, it'd be great if it was like this all summer. Can you imagine 3 months? Just 3 months. That's it. See, the other 9 months can rain 100% of the time. Don't care.
I would enjoy the novelty for maybe 3 weeks. And then I'd be like, I want my jacket back. I like wearing jackets too much.
Anyways, very serious story. Hose pipe ban. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we're running out of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people are being urged to think of our data centers.
Think of the data centers.
Tell me more.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of truth in jest. And this was a story on Waterford Whispers News. So, that we're not buying into that. We're not having one of these Onion moments where Fox News ends up, reporting something in the Onion as fact.
True.
But this is a bit of whimsy that actually made us think. So yes, there is a hose pipe ban in parts of the country. We also know we've got I don't want to say we've got a problem with data centers. I mean, we do and we don't. There's a limit to the load data centers can put on our national grid. And we also know that data centers are very hungry when it comes to cooling. To the point that this was a report in NPR. So these are American figures, but it'll give you a very good idea. So the average data center uses 300,000 gallons of water a day to keep cool. That's a lot of water, right?
Okay.
To put that into context, that's 100,000 regular homes. You could run a small town on the water it takes to cool a data center every day.
So a data center is using the same amount of water per day as a town of 100,000 homes.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is a fact. That's kind of a stunning fact, and hence that's why Waterford Whispers News had their what was that? The headline? I have it here: "Inconsiderate public urged to please think of the data centres before watering lawns. Many selfish gardeners are squandering vital water that could otherwise be used to cool our precious data centres." Yes, high sarcasm indeed. I love that website. Interesting though, the amount of water that is needed for those data centres.
Yeah.
Right. What else we got going on in the world today? Now, Dennis O'Brien, a man I know, has been annoying you.
He's been, I in our notes for the show, I just straight away put, "Okay, boomer."
Okay. Yeah. He's getting old at this stage.
We've got a generational issue here, I think.
Oh, continue.
So, this is reported in many outlets this week. The telecoms magnate has come out and effectively said telecoms are not a good productivity tool. That's how I'm framing it. You might decide to be much more facetious than I, or much more reasonable. It's up to you. But basically, he came out and said that remote working was a load of nonsense.
Okay.
And, okay, there could be a generational thing going on there. I mean, he's a man that worked a certain way all his life. And if that's what has worked for him, that has worked for him.
I've looked it up. He's 67 years of age. So, yeah. He would have a different experience to a lot of people in the workplace now, yeah.
He should be away somewhere enjoying life on a warm island.
I think he does. I think he does that anyway.
So that he doesn't have to... Well, anyway, we won't go down that particular road. But, so, I mean, he does not believe in remote working. I think... the world has moved on. I think we all believe in remote working. I mean, your workforce is remote. I work remotely an awful lot of the time. He believes that as a productivity sort of effort, it doesn't work. You don't get as much out of your staff. Now, I went and, don't take my word for it kind of thing. I went and I read around with different recruitment websites, because I get a lot of press releases in as well. Yeah. People saying, look, people love remote working. It saves on your commute. It has wellness benefits. It has become a selling point for Gen Z. So if you want to attract the best talent, you've got to demonstrate flexibility and that you appreciate people's work-life balance. Yeah. And remote working is a very easy way to do it. You got a good broadband connection and you can prove your productivity, you are going to be just fine with remote working. And of course, it expands your catchment area for talent as well, because if you can't get the developer you want around the corner, but you can get them, say, in the next county, and it's all the same to you as an employer, whether they can, whether they have to travel 10 minutes to a remote hub or 1 minute to their kitchen table, or they want to come into an office, it can be all the same to you. So who actually is interested in getting people back into the office? Personally, I have it divided into two camps, right? You've got people with control issues, and you can extend that to organizations with control issues. And that's another story we'll be talking about later. Or people or organizations that have invested an awful lot in property. And we know during COVID that a lot of organizations, a lot of multinationals invested a lot of money in property. Yeah, and but they want to get as many people back in those buildings as possible and to let as many of those people go. Yeah, that's possible.
A lot of those corporations surprisingly rent their buildings. They don't actually build them, the long-term leases. I would actually, listening to you and listening to what Dennis O'Brien said, this will probably come as no surprise to you, but I would come more on the side of Dennis O'Brien than with you.
Okay, boomer.
It's not because I'm a boomer, all right? It's because it's extremes. Dennis O'Brien is saying that, working, remote working just is not working. It's a load of nonsense. So he's one extreme. And then you're saying remote working is the only way to go. Okay? Actually, I don't agree with either of you. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think when we had remote working first, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, who's a CEO of an engineering firm, and we were saying that during COVID and everybody was kind of working from home and it was all way amazing. And also we couldn't go out and do anything else. All right. Productivity, boom, through the roof. This is amazing. People are working from home and we're getting more productivity. It's not as productive as it was. All right. People are kind of learning, I'm working from home now. Well, then maybe I'll, do this or whatever. So it's not quite as productive as it was. Where I would sit is right in the middle. And I think it's the hybrid arrangement that works best. And I think it works best for the employer. And I think it works best for if you're working for a company, because really, do you want to be working for a company where you're sitting at home in a home office all day, every day, and then spending the remainder of your evening in that same home?
Okay, well, I know people that have been driven batty by that kind of arrangement.
Exactly.
But
so you have a mix where you have 2 or 3 days in the office.
I think what has happened with work is that an awful lot of additional personal politics have arrived, because Gen Z are pretty good at recognizing, look, the people at the top of the ladder, there's a handful of them. Most of them won't come up through the company the way that I will if I come in at an entry level.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get a sweet deal. So I'm going to work as hard as I need to. And that's it. Right? Now, if you come into a physical office and you get a feel for the culture of a place, the levels of productivity that are expected, that has allowed Gen Z to set what they might regard as an acceptable level of effort, knowing that they're only going to get so far in a company, right? So this is how you came to things like quiet quitting and coffee badging and things like that. Just things that create the illusion of being a high-performing staff member, right? However, if you haven't had experience of an office culture, well, then remote working probably isn't a good solution for you, because you've no benchmark. You haven't experienced any mentoring. You don't know where you fit in the hierarchy. If you go in and, if you were full-time before COVID, or if you're hybrid working now, you do get a sense of, okay, I am as good as this person, or these are the gaps in my knowledge. These are the things I need to work on. These are the things I can get away with. Because as we know, work is, you kind of have to be a political animal when you go to work. And the bigger the organization, the more political and strategically you have to think. Now, I mean, we both work for very small organizations. So if something goes wrong, you know exactly who is at fault, and what they can do to either make sure it doesn't happen again, or, maybe find somebody better at the job. There's no hiding in a small organization. If you're in a much larger one, well, you can figure out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can figure out where to hide.
Yeah.
So now, I can see somebody who is used to owning and running a very large operation saying remote work is nonsense because, somebody has come in and you're not getting the water cooler moments. But hey, you're also not getting a level of what one person might call supervision, another would call control.
Oh, the C word.
The C word. Because that's, people see an option not to have remote working or hybrid working, and they think, well, that's because you want to look over my shoulder, and that's not a work culture I'm interested in.
Okay, well, there you go. So Dennis is a boomer and you're Gen Z then.
I'm not that. You're 2 generations removed. I've come to learn that Gen X is actually the greatest generation.
All.
Not the one that actually defeated the Nazis. It's the ones that got through, the grunge movement.
Listen, speaking of the workplace and tech jobs, Microsoft have come up with an interesting arrangement that they need to shave people off their organization. I think they want to drop 3% worldwide or something like that. They have a scheme with very interesting wording.
Well, I mean, this is something that we knew was coming down the line. We knew Microsoft were going to let a lot of people go. We weren't sure how many or where from. So in terms of the Irish operation, we still don't know where from. But we know roughly who they're looking to get rid of. And this is because they have modeled their approach on Amazon's, which they called Pivot. They gave their mass firing project a name, as opposed to, we're going to streamline, which is what all the other places said post-COVID. So the plan, as you said, 3% of the workforce, 6,000 people. Microsoft had a very famous productivity measure called stack ranking, which worked on the assumption that, somebody was always hiding in an organization. In the same way that we talked about just there, that there's always people that are underperforming intentionally. And we can get rid of those people fairly easily. Now, the current thinking is, okay, let's have a look at performance and let's try and get rid of as many tiers of kind of non-performing sales or middle management, places that are actually quite hard to demonstrate what they bring to the company. Right? If you're a software developer, you can point to something and go, that's what I did. If you're in middle management and your job is to help put people in the mindset that they can deliver that, it's quite difficult to justify your employment. Yeah. And that's the kind of people Microsoft are going after. So this creates a very interesting strategy from Redmond. And I want your input on this, right? Both as an individual and an employer, right? Somebody comes to you and says, okay, we can pay you off. We're doing this thing. We're letting people go. Everybody knows this. And, we will pay you 16 weeks of severance, right? That's one conversation you might have. Another conversation that you might have is somebody comes to you and goes, do you know what? We've been looking at where you're sitting in terms of your overall output and this kind of thing. And we think you would benefit from a performance improvement plan. And if at the end of that plan, it can go one or two ways. If you're successful under the plan, you get to keep your job and we don't need to talk about this ever again. But maybe if you don't reach the targets that we set for you, well, we'll have to let you go. No severance. Right? So somebody comes to you with that choice, right? They say 16 weeks and goodbye, or performance improvement plan, we're not sure you'll keep your job. On principle, what would you do?
I think the majority of people do like their job, and I think the majority of people do want to do well in their job. So I think the majority of people will think to keep the status quo and to go with the performance plan, providing that the targets are reasonable, okay? Maybe it might be a case of, well, after we're a little bit harder to hit these targets, but that's fine. Or I'm hitting those targets anyway, and that's fine. Or you might get somebody who's going, oh, Christ, I'm never going to get there. They've got a problem, all right? That's where I think the majority of people will land. I don't think people will go for the redundancy because, certainly that might be in the States. In Ireland, you've got all kinds of regulations about the redundancy and what entitlements you have, et cetera, and so on and so forth. I would say that on that question of performance plan or redundancy, the majority of people go for performance plan. And as a person who runs a business, I think a performance plan is actually kind of a good idea. All right. And I'm just being completely selfish, right? As somebody who's trying to don't look at it as an employer. I'm running a system and an organization. Okay. So there are various parts in that organization and things have to be done. And they have to be done by a certain time and to a certain quality, okay? And you will know this as well in media team and all of the things, the events that are put on and the publications that are done. We all have deadlines, okay? So it's kind of like, well, have you achieved that by that time? Okay? I think from an employer's point of view, that's great because you want to be able to say, well, then I can rely on that part of the system or the company to have that job done.
Hmm. Okay.
That's the way I would look at it.
And here's the flaw I find in your argument.
Okay.
Right? You have your goal, right, is to have a successful product, a successful project.
Yes.
Right? The successful project in Microsoft's case is to let go of 6,000 people.
And this is, I think you're confusing the two things. They need to get rid of 6,000 people in their organization for whatever reason. That's one thing, but they have chosen this method in order to do it. Okay? So what you're talking about with the performance plan, is that something that should be in every business, in every company? And I think, yeah, why not? Okay. You know? But Microsoft are using that as to try and balance out the redundancy side of things. Do you know what I mean? Do you want to quit now, or do you want to keep going? And if you don't hit your targets, we're going to fire you anyway. Yeah. That's how it's coming across, like, you know, so it's not good. Anyway,
because I'm just saying from our perspective, a successful outcome is delivering the project. Yeah. From Microsoft's perspective, the successful outcome is getting rid of people.
Well, listen, do you know what the next thing for Microsoft will be the U word, union. Anyway, let's not go there. Let's not go there. All right. Another interesting story that is breaking Thursday this week, and that is the whole thing about cookies. Okay. So we're used to the EU introducing this thing about cookies, and they'll tell you what the cookies are for, and then you have to click OK. And then those cookies will then realize that you're interested in that particular subject because you've been on that website. And then when you're on other related websites, it will show you ads for the first thing you were looking at. It's called retargeting. And actually, I think it's a good thing, because if you're interested in lawnmowers and you're looking at a lawnmower website, and then you go to a gardening shop or a gardening website or whatever, it'll show you ads for the lawnmower. Why not? It keeps things relevant. All right. However, the entire system has now been ruled by a Belgian Court of Appeal to say that breaks GDPR and is therefore illegal. Yeah. And even though Google are the kings of this, and probably, you know, it's kind of the majority user, it does go across all of the other advertising systems that are used by Amazon or by X or Microsoft, whatever. The court is basically saying that these cookies are deceiving hundreds of millions of Europeans.
Yeah, well, this is a decision that originally came down in 2022. So the timeline is kind of interesting. 2018, we had GDPR come in. 2022, so you can imagine that this legal action started, you know, January 2nd to 2018, you know? Yeah. This was probably something that was in the works. Finally, a decision in 2022, finally an appeal in 2025. So I would imagine this is, you know, going without break, you know, as opposed to, you know, we'll devote 6 months here, 6 months there, etc. So this appeal wasn't filed by big tech. It was filed by IAB Europe, which is an industry body. And they represent pretty much everyone that would be advertising online. Sort of ad agencies and things like that, as well as the big tech firms whose commercial model relies on them. And, you know exactly what the arguments for and against are going to be, because they're embedded into the discourse when it comes to personal data. Specifically, when we talk about AI, you know, it's always, you know, I didn't consent for anything I said to be used in the creation of a large language model. I didn't consent for this use over here. And the counter argument is always move fast, break things. Oh, you're against innovation.
Yeah, well, we've had analysts saying that. Yeah,
always. And, you know, I thought there was a very good counter argument made by Johnny Ryan, who's director of Enforce at the Irish Council for Civil Liberties. And for anyone that has been following privacy in Ireland, I mean, he is, you know, he's a god tier expert at this stage. You know, he's the guy. He has worked with publishers everywhere. He's worked with big tech firms everywhere.
Yeah.
And has never compromised on his belief that, you know, one's individual space is your space. Your privacy is, you know, should be a given. And
so you would have thought then that Johnny Ryan thought that cookies was a good idea, but what's his view on it?
Well, I'll just give you a direct quote from him that was issued in answer to the decision. He said, "The tech industry has sought to hide its vast data breach behind sham consent pop-ups. Tech companies turn the GDPR into a daily nuisance rather than a shield for people."
Oh, very well summed up.
Because what's the first thing that happens when you visit a website you haven't visited before?
The cookie pop-ups just drive me. And I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that. I just see it and I just click okay, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I kind of go, I'm not too sure. And it'll kind of go, you know, well, you can choose what you want to do. And then it goes, here's the 3,450 advertisers we work with. Select which ones you approve.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, right. That is definitely turning it into a daily nuisance rather than anything else. It's interesting, though. We'll wait and see what the reaction to that is over the next couple of weeks. But Anna Leary, who I mentioned, is the head of Meta in Ireland. She has been saying exactly what you said. These rules, you know, they do limit potential to a certain extent. And because of that, the EU is stifling innovation, which I think it is, but it's doing it for the safety of the people within the EU.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's a pro-consumer
the
decision.
There you go. It's the balance that's not correct. And it's like, as Johnny Ryan said, GDPR was brought in, you know, to protect people, but the tech companies have now turned it into a real PITA. Pain in the butt. Just being nice about it. Also in advertising today, Ireland is putting towards suggesting a new law to apply across Europe where tech companies will have to validate who their advertisers are before they're allowed to advertise.
Oh, that's good.
It is actually, do you know what? It's not bad. I mean, the whole thing with Google AdWords and stuff like that when it started was anybody can put an ad onto the internet and you can do it for pennies. So, and people did, all right? And it was great for, you know, kind of small sole traders or whatever to advertise. But of course, then you get the chancers, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, the amount of crypto crap I get.
Yeah.
I mean, where are these guys? I don't want to know. I just want them gone.
Exactly. And most of them are, you know, nowhere. So what Ireland is proposing is that the tech companies vet the advertisers and that in Ireland specifically, only registered financial service providers who are registered with the central bank can place ads for financial products that are shown online in Ireland. I think it's a great idea. It's a great idea. There we go. Ireland leading the world, just as we will on Saturday night at Eurovision, providing that we're not knocked out on Thursday night, which is probably most likely. Right. What else have we got? One more story about somebody who bought 300 million worth of crypto waste, I would call it. The Pope, interestingly, has come out talking about AI. And when I say that, it was his first press briefing, and Leo the 14th, right? I'm such a nerd. I've written it down as Leo version 14. How bad am I? Going to hell for that. But anyway, in his first press briefing, one of the things he talked about was AI, and he said that it does bring immense potential for good. However, it also can pose challenges for human dignity, for justice and labour. And before him, Pope Francis had a quote, which I thought was interesting. He said, "We should look less at screens and look at each other in the eyes more."
Yeah.
Think about that.
I can't argue with that.
Can't argue with it, all right? I'm in no way religious, but I just thought it was interesting. Grant, final story of the week. Somebody has bought $300 million worth of a very special crypto.
A very special meme coin called Trump. Okay, now let's get cynical.
Let's get cynical.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be done for copyright theft now for singing that, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, so this was in the New York Times, a story that broke barely hours before we started having this conversation. Because we've been talking a while.
Too long, some would say, but go on.
So a very, very small company in the States, apparently, called GD Culture Group. They employ 8 people. They made no revenue last year. And they have bought up $300 million worth of Trump coin, which they say is being financed by a stock sale. How one is going to buy 300 million worth of stock in a company that has reported no income. Yeah. Okay, let's sidestep that for a while.
Dodgy going on. Go on.
So a lot of people have said to adopt the tone of the potential beneficiary of this purchase, have been talking about TikTok, because Trump has extended the deadline for the sale of TikTok's US operation. Mm-hmm. And as we know, we've had bids come together, or almost come together, to buy the operation of the parent company ByteDance, which of course is based in China. The concern is that China would have access to the personal data of US citizens. It was considered not acceptable by the Biden administration. They introduced a ban. The deadline on it, again, extended. Apparently, the ban extends next month in the States, sort of the latest version. So what has happened now is that Mr. Trump, El Presidente, numero uno in the United States of America.
It's not El Presidente this week, it's Shake Trump.
So his own personal crypto is getting, he's going to pocket an awful lot of money off this purchase. And it makes you wonder, this is a company that has ties to China. So what's going to happen? Is there going to be a sale of TikTok to some US entity we happen to have not heard of? Mm-hmm. Or is this proposed ban just going to disappear? Like so many things in America at the moment, in terms of regulation and, prosecutions and sentencing for various felonies, will they just magically disappear?
No, they won't disappear. But what I think, and the reason I say they won't disappear is because this is not exactly, it was Trump in his first term was the one who started the whole TikTok thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then it was Biden who continued it on. Now Trump is back. You would expect him to finish off the job. But I think it's going to be a deal that's going to be done. And we may even never know what that deal is.
You said the D word. Of course.
I said the D. Well, there you go. Yeah. But it is very interesting that a small company that has, kind of no real financial activity, employs 8 people in a nameless office, and then suddenly they're buying hundreds of $millions worth of cryptocurrency, which was founded by the...
Yeah.
Shall I say?
It's named after him. There's no hiding
exactly. It. There you go. Yeah. I'm just trying to think. It's not the most highly rated in responsibility president of the United States.
Well, the guy was accepting a jumbo jet this week. And,
this is nothing. Yeah, exactly. All right. Anyway, we keep an eye on it. Lots going on in tech, Niall. As always, let's wrap it up there. And thanks for keeping us up to date with everything.
Delivering Irish tech news since 2006, this is Tech Radio.
Using AI to create art or music is a highly controversial topic at the moment. We've already seen it in books and large language models, but now there are a wealth of websites creating music based on vibe, genre, or even including sung lyrics. So why would any talented musician allow their work to train an AI? Effectively, they're training the competition. Dr. Martin Clancy is a Senior AI Research Fellow at the Insight Research Ireland Centre for Data Analytics at DCU, and also a Policy Fellow at Trinity College Dublin's Long Room Hub. His current project is called AI OK and looks at how creative industries can learn to love generative AI. He told Niall Kitson more about the project.
Martin, in looking at the relationship between music and copyright and trust, It seems to me that it breaks down into roughly two conversations. One would be audiences' relationships with artists, which I think changed for the better during the pandemic, and also artists' relationship with technology, which of course is, it goes back to the microphone, if not previous. So, would you agree that we're dealing with two conversations at the same time when we talk about the application of AI in music?
Absolutely. I mean, let's take the second part that you asked, because that's the easier one, because that's an ongoing conversation, which is artists' relationship with technology. So those, they're completely intertwined and historically have always been the case. So you mentioned the microphone. So that was the Mr. Bing Crosby, who's somebody who's not kind of noted as being a major technological innovator, but he was. He not only with the condenser microphone, but then with a multi-track recording, we wouldn't have had any of that without old Bing, right? So our relationship with technology is always, when I say we musicians or artists' relationship with technology is fairly fundamental. In fact, it goes back beyond even humans. So there's an Nathaniel bone flute from 40,000 years ago, and they had a pentatonic scale. So it's even pre-human, all right? So this is just business as unusual with AI? Yes and no. So it's the same dialogue, except for the AI technology is different than any technologies that we've encountered before. And thus it requires, I believe, a different approach than we've had in the past.
And then looking at how people engage then with artists, I think the pandemic kind of changed that relationship. I'd say for the better. I mean, we know an awful lot of people released what you might call COVID albums that were developed in their bedroom and have all been quite successful. So has that sort of accessibility helped people appreciate artists more? Or has it been a case of, well, look, I can do this at home. So really, maybe it doesn't have as much value as I thought it did before.
Okay, well, that breaks down into a couple of questions. So we just unpack that a little bit. So the first one is I completely agree with you in relation to the positive aspects of COVID, but for a slightly different reason. One of the things that we saw globally, in relation to the pandemic, was when governments decided to intervene to support the arts, there was no pushback. There were loads of different approaches in Ireland, all across Africa, even in the US. No one really questioned the idea that arts needed to be protected. And whether those initiatives were successful, and there was loads of variations. For the first time, I kind of went, well, this is kind of interesting, because I've been writing about the potential threats of AI to employment, which is my keen particular interest. And I saw that there was no public pushback about the idea that, of course, we need to protect the arts. So that's the first part in relation to positive aspects of post-pandemic and what that means. The second one is more curious. And there's this separation between audience and creators or artists. Clearly, we've seen that merge and change for a long, long time. And if we take it historically, because sometimes we need to look at the bigger picture of this. There's a chap called Jacques Attali, who was economic advisor to Mitterrand and Sarkozy. A bit of a futurist, to say the least. He wrote a book in 1977 called Noise, where he predicted that the future would be one of prosumers. And that's where the difference between creators and consumers would blur. I wrote to him and interviewed him for my book, and went back again to speak to him about these issues, all of which he confirmed that AI represents all the technology that he somehow or other predicted in 1977. Taken from that point, what does that mean in the present day? If we look at, for instance, fan fiction and the popularity of fan fiction, all that goes with that in terms of copyright infringement, but also how that kind of very loving, very passionate, very supportive audience creation occurred. So that originally occurred with, say, just fiction writing prior to AI. Now we have a situation where if you don't like, say, for instance, where Marvel's going or where the Star Wars franchise is going, then you can tell your own tales. Now, what that means in terms of copyright and where that's going is a different discussion. But to your point, this separation between consumers, passive consumers sitting down, turn the television on, and content creators coming to you from the BBC. I kind of think we're past that point. Do you know what I mean? So AI just goes into that mix and kind of puts it on steroids. That's what I would think.
So let's have a look at one of the foundation of AI as we know it today, which is sort of the input of training data, whether, by design with the consent of the artist or without consent of the artist. And this is kind of where our issue kind of resides today, isn't it? It's sort of whether you actually consent to have your material, whether it be music, whether it be fiction, etc., used in a data set or where not. So have you noticed an awful lot of, I would say, artists, perhaps record labels, waking up and going, actually, this is happening on our watch? Like what's happening with our product? Are people making money off something that we invested in, that we created with that sort of level of passion and the will to connect with a human being, as opposed to just create something that sounds human, but actually is just there as a distraction?
Yeah. So again, we have to uncouple artists from rights holders, because there's different responsibilities, even if ultimately they're part of the same wheelhouse. There's different perspectives on that. So from a rights holders, major label, independent label, catalog owner perspective, you're looking at, and quite correctly looking at this in terms of, say, the way you would do with licensing for when any new technology would come along. So how do you, for instance, with YouTube, how does YouTube pay, for instance, rights holders? So when YouTube became the biggest, most popular form, which it still is, for listening to music, for a long time, they were protected by a little loophole called safe haven, which meant that they didn't have to pay the way that a traditional national broadcaster would. That's been resolved to the satisfaction of rights holders, but it took a long time. So that you can see it from their perspective, how they're approaching AI, which is like, well, this is our content. Is that content being used? However, from the artist's perspective, there's a slightly different argument, which is that, and I'm trying to be as agnostic about this as possible. I'm just presenting where the different conversations are occurring, is that these new technologies have been used in ways that hadn't been imagined. So the idea, say, repurposing someone's voice. So if you had a recording contract, does that mean that you had the rights to that person's voice? And these are the wider areas of opt-in and opt-out. And it's not that anyone's really anticipated this. It's just that this is happening when we become entangled, to use that term, with these technologies going, well, geez, we hadn't thought of that. So who has the right to Prince's voice, or who? And if that's then generating these things, but then again, that's on the upper tier of superstar. Personally, I'm much more concerned on a grassroots level of, well, currently, if you're working in music, even to a modestly successful area, you might have 2 or 3 side gigs, side hustles, other jobs that you're doing that support that. And again, that's not a bad thing, but it's a fragile thing. And that goes back to COVID. And it received the idea that the public care about artists supporting artists. AI is this remarkable technology, certainly generative AI is. And so how do we work our way through this at the speed of acceleration of its introduction? That's where we are.
You've raised a fascinating side issue there when you mention the likes of Prince, effectively talking about the one percenters in the music industry that would potentially, or rather their estates might be the most impacted, especially as we enter the deep fake age. Is really this a problem that musicians have to deal with an aggression or on the scale that, maybe the average person thinks they should? Is the problem overstated?
That's a good question. Well, we'd need a Ouija board to check out with Prince what he would think about it, but I think it's safe enough for someone who is so creative, who would like, I was just reading about Prince the other day. I mean, he is, he's such an exception in terms of his creativity. Like, he would run 4 studios simultaneously and have 4 studios running and be the only person who's playing in all 4 and knock out 8 songs a day. I mean, that's not the norm. So I think it's fair enough to say that on one level, that replacement for Prince of that technology would be awful to him. However, you can only imagine what he might have done with the technology. And that's the part that becomes more curious, where we're not in this cut and replace, like this piece of technology will do this, which I currently do, as opposed to this technology, to go back to your one about Bing Crosby and the microphone, would allow me to whisper over an orchestra. It wasn't designed for that. That's the history of music technology, is that something is created and then reimagined and repurposed. So it's the likes of a Bing Crosby or a Prince that we need to kind of go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are artists out there that have embraced generative AI, not in the sense of trying to remove what they do or to bump up their catalogs or inflate their catalogs, but to treat it, as we were talking before recording, as kind of a happening, almost, where we have bands like Databots and also 65 Days of Static. Again, using generative AI to replicate, well, maybe not even replicate, but to use it as an instrument to foster the same kind of human-to-human connection, instead of using it as a means to astroturf or inflate their catalogs.
I couldn't agree more. However, I do think that there is a noticeable silence when you think about, for instance, there's 10,000 tracks being put up on Deezer per day, which are AI generated, basically from Udio or Sunio. I just think, like, I'm old enough to have been around a few music revolutions. And when you speak about happening, it's the silence of creativity that I'm surprised by. Now, that might suddenly change. It could suddenly change this summer. We could have something that's like punk, and suddenly you go, okay, I think a new movement has emerged. But to me, it's all quiet on the artist front, and that's surprising.
So let's have a look then at your current project, which is AI OK, which is tackling that issue of the artist relationship with artificial intelligence and whether we can sort of identify in an ethical way what has been generated and what has been trained with consent, as opposed to having training data scraped.
Yeah, we go a little bit further than that. So it's not about this idea of attribution or anything. What it literally is, and this is a notion that came out from my PhD research, and now it's funded by Enterprise Ireland. And I've basically been going around the world talking about it. And it's a bigger thing. It's about what we think is okay. And the way that we do that is through sector specific. So people who work within the music industry or the music ecosystem coming together and going, well, what kind of future do we want with this technology? And what is it that we care about? And what are the issues? And then marking products and services that we feel are aligned to those values. And what that is to be determined. But it's to replace this fearful, sudden, atomized engagement with, oh my God, what's my future going to look like? And effectively get people together to discuss, but mark those with a revocable trust mark. And thankfully, that conversation is now happening like We've got a lot going on in the UK. We've got lots of stuff happening in Scandinavia. I go to Lagos in June. And I'm just basically bringing it back to Ireland now. This is the first time in the last 18 months that I started bringing it here, because I think we've got a really good opportunity in Ireland to set a standard. But it's literally conversations about what it is, like we're having now, and then reaching consensus.
And have you found any difference, not just across territories, but also across different genres of music?
Not so much with genres. Like the two bands that you mentioned, I don't know the first one, but the second one, the Dadabots, come out of computational creativity, like a very academic kind of, and you could argue privileged conceptual art approach, which is fascinating and good of its own, but doesn't really marry with the reality of people who play in wedding bands and who are trying to make independent albums, So that's a different economic reality. So that goes across all genres into different territories. I think that there's certainly hope on what I found, and still very early days, but in my conversations, both in South Africa and in Nigeria, where, for instance, they've been excluded for such a long time from the mainstream Western economic model, and yet that's the harder music. Do you know what I mean? So there's because I guess because the systems have rewarded them less, do you know what I mean, in terms of like even the 1%, there's a sense of, well, how can we make a future with this new technology? Is this a way that we can grab this and reimagine it and create new economic revenue streams? So the fundamentals of the questions that I'm asking from in a Western privilege position, where people say, well, look, I earn this money, or this is my IP for Prince, or this is my, it's more open-minded there, because you say, when you've got nothing, you've kind of got nothing left to lose. So you might as well reimagine it all. And I think that's kind of when you speak about that word happening, that we may find a reimagining of these new tools in some of the least expected places that we might find. You know what I mean? I can speak a lot about this, but I'm conscious of your time.
Just one last point, and going back to sort of the deep fake concept. Do you think that artists will have sort of contracts that basically cover their likeness, their creativity, their style, that would have to extend to perpetuity to make sure that their for I suppose their idiom continues to make money, not just for themselves but for their estates going forward as well? Or will we be looking at a kind of a copyright model of 70 years after your death you kind of become fair game? Is this a conversation you've come across yet?
When I was a teenager and I signed my first recording contract, I remember at the time there was a clause that said, for all known technologies and those to be reimagined, and it's for planet Earth and the universe. And this was like I remember giggling about this. Now, the fact is that some lawyers have spoken to me and said that those type of belts and braces, clauses are legally sustainable, or, if tested in court, couldn't be proved. So that's for lawyers, and that's all about arguments and legal counsel and opinion and But I think it goes without saying that, like, if we think about sports, we can see that, for instance, personality rights and image rights have been used as part of contracts. And there's more parts of human creativity, are parts that will generate IP outside of say, writing a song, recording a song, playing it live, and selling a T-shirt, which are the four areas that are the traditional music industry. If you find a new form of remuneration, then you'll go, oh, we haven't thought of that. Can we? And so that could be included in contracts. It's just legacy going back to go, well, we hadn't thought of that. We think it covers it. That's going to be something I think we'll see issues with legally. And what I'm kind of hoping can be done is that it doesn't turn into some legacy fight, because what ultimately pulls everybody together is the fact that at some stage, these are people who care about music, and the money flows some part back to humans who are involved in music. What we don't want to see happening is that an international quarrel occurs, and meanwhile, a not nefarious actor, but somebody who's not involved in music can benefit from a quarrel that's occurring. That would be my concern. That's the arc of AI OK, is to get people together, to get them to talk and reach ethical standards, meaning what is it we care about? Let's not be afraid, mark the products and services and move on, and then meet regularly. And then if someone does something bad, turn it off. But have that conversation and shape the future.
And that was Niall Kitson chatting with Dr. Martin Clancy. If you'd like to know more about AI OK, their website is ai-ok.org. There's also a free ticketed event in the National Concert Hall next Thursday, the 22nd of May, which is co-organised by Insight Research Ireland Centre for Data Analytics and Adapt Research Ireland Centre for AI-driven digital content technology. For more on that, and if you'd like to go and reserve a place, visit the National Concert Hall's website at nch.ie. All of those details and the websites are in the description area of this podcast for you right now.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Do check out some of the other stories that we have online. Believe it, there's so much going on. What else we got online that we didn't manage to get into the podcast?
Yeah, France wants to put an age limit on social media. Research Ireland names a new CEO. And Meta floats the idea of paying content creators in crypto.
You'll find all of those stories and more online at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show for you online and with RTE Radio 1 Extra. In the meantime, please do remember to share our podcast with a friend. If they're interested in tech and gadgets, just tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever they get their podcasts. Until next week, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and from Niall Kitson, as always, take care. Have a great weekend.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.